we go.
We good? Yeah, we've been studying from John and at Waynesboro, and I guess that just was on my mind. So open your Bibles up to Luke 14. Luke, that's good. That'll be right, I think. So what I want to do this morning is just, I want to talk just a little bit about what it means to lead a cross life. You see these bumper stickers around, sometimes, they've got on cars that say Salt Life or River Life or something like that. And I guess what that means is these people would say, I'd rather be on the water than anywhere else. Rather be doing that. Rather be living that kind of life. I think for Christians, we have to have a life that says we want a cross life. And we have to understand what the cross life is all about. For us, it is the idea of the cross. Now, I want you to picture and understand what the cross is. I remember Paul writing and Paul saying, I will boast in the cross of Christ. Now, I find that interesting because I think, why didn't he say, I boast in Christ? He said, I boast in the cross of Christ. And when I look at the cross and understand what the cross is and what the cross means, and realize what the cross was, it was a means of execution. It was a shameful thing in that day. It was a horrible thing to be associated with the cross. And yet Paul said to the people, I will boast in the cross of Christ. Now, when I think about that, I think this is something I need to understand, something I need to know. I need to realize what kind of life I want if I say I want to boast in the cross of Christ, or if I want to live a cross life, what does that mean? So look in Luke chapter 14. And I've got, 2 or 3 points here that we'll try to make. Start in verse 25. Now, in verse 25, there are great crowds that are following after Jesus. And you think that'd be a positive thing, something that he would be happy about. But he doesn't see it as a positive thing. He kind of sees it, if I understand this correctly, he kind of sees it as a negative thing. I mean, his ministry is going in a good direction, and this seems to be the thing that most everybody wants. Let's get as many people in as we can. We want big crowds. That's what we want, things like that. But Jesus wasn't really interested in that. He didn't think of it in that way. He thought great crowds were a problem. Now, why would he think that was a problem? Why would great crowds cause a problem? Why would he be disturbed by this? And the reason that he was disturbed by it is because following him is not an easy task. Following Christ is not easy for anybody. It's not easy for anyone. He wanted to make sure that every person understood what it meant to follow him. So listen to these verses now, verse 26 and 27. If any man come to me and hate not his father and his mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whosoever doth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. How many times have we read that? How many times have you heard somebody talk about that? How many times have those words passed through your life and you realize that Jesus is saying something here, but we're not exactly sure what he's saying? Now, that's a startling declaration that he just made. I think it's amazing. He just told the crowds not to focus on their families. He just told them that if you want to follow me, your family cannot come first. Your family must not be first. You cannot be my disciple. It is impossible for you to be my disciple if your family comes first. How many of us put family first? But he didn't stop there, did he? He went on to tell them all these things. He says we are to hate our families. Now, he's not talking about an emotion of hate. He's not talking about any malice or anything like that. Nobody should be sitting there thinking, well, I hate my parents, so I guess I'm going to heaven. That's not what he's saying. That's not the idea. The idea is to make a choice. And the choice is simply this. Jesus, think about it in these terms. The ancient world frequently spoke of matters in sort of categorical context as opposed to anything else. So Jesus is not talking about emotion here. He's talking about choosing. He's talking about making a decision here, a conscious decision here. Paul quotes God as saying, Jacob I loved and Esau I hated. Now, you think God hated Esau? Well, of course not. He blessed Esau. Esau got a lot of blessings. Jacob got the major blessing, and Jacob became one of those three patriarchs that we think about, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Esau was not the one to do that. But God did not hate him. He didn't have any malice toward Esau or anything like that. He just chose Jacob over Esau. And that's what Jesus is saying here. He's making this exact same point in verse 26. The point is that our loyalty must be to Jesus above all else. That's a cross life. That's the kind of life that we all, as Christians, and I'm assuming that most everybody in this room right now is a Christian, or claim to be a Christian. So that's what he's saying. If you want to be my disciple, if you want to be my follower, here's the choice. Me. Not your family, not your friends, not anything else. It's me. You have to choose me. Now, that doesn't mean that we go along and somehow we fail in our responsibilities as husbands or wives or parents or children. It doesn't mean that we undo scriptures that tell us to love our families, to love our children, love our neighbors, and all that. Doesn't mean that at all. The point is simply this: the family is never placed ahead of Jesus. Did I make that point? Because I just want it to be simple enough for us to understand that this is it. What did he say? He said, don't put your family before Jesus. That's what he said. That was a whole point of this thing. Family never goes first. Family never makes the decision. Jesus is always first. Jesus is always the priority in every decision, even when it comes to family. Now, that's the first declaration that he makes here. Second one is, I don't know, maybe even more startling. And that's in verse 27. Because he said, not only is it not your family, but what is it also not? Not you either. You must hate your own life also. You cannot be first before Jesus. So whenever the choice comes down to me or Jesus, what's the choice? Which one should I pick? I should pick Jesus, right? How many times do we do that? How many times do we pick ourselves over Jesus? The imagery in verse 27 confirms the understanding that we ought to have. We are to take up our cross. We are to follow Jesus. Listen to what he told the crowd. Please understand what he said to the crowd. Following Jesus means doing his will, not ours. Following Jesus means doing what he wants us to do, not what we want to do. I am wanting to follow Jesus, so I have to do what he says to do, not what I want to do. Now, when you say things like this, you're going to thin out the crowd pretty quickly. People are not going to hang around for that. They're going to say, well, what are you talking about? I mean, I don't understand this. And he never tried to trick people into following him and then surprise them later with, oh, by the way. No, he always told them up front, this is what it takes. This is what it's going to be if you follow me. Anytime there were crowds, he was telling them what following him looked like. This is the choice that you have to make. Sometimes we think we're ready for this, but we find out we're not. There's another occasion that Jesus said, this is also in the book of Luke, back in chapter 9. And I think it starts about verse 57. And what does he say there? He's going along the road. Somebody says to him, I will follow you wherever you go. And then Jesus says to them, well, foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but what does the Son of Man have? Huh? Don't even have a place to lay my head. I don't even have that. That's what he's telling them here. So, to another, he looked and said, follow me. Now, what did that fellow say? Well, first I need to go and let me do this first. I need to go bury somebody. And he looks at another and he says, follow me. Or another says, I'll follow you. And Jesus said, you need to weigh the cost. Ultimately, he tells him, no man having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of God. Now, everybody in this passage here from Luke 9 seems to be saying the right thing. I'll follow you. I want to do what you want, but something I need to take care of first. And I think a lot of us are like that also. You understand what Jesus wants from us. You understand what Jesus asked of us. Would you follow Jesus? It's a hypothetical question. But would you follow Jesus if you didn't have the comforts of your home? Now just think about that for a minute before you jump in and go, well, sure. No house, no bed, no microwave. I'm trying to think of something else, Would you follow Jesus if you didn't have all that? If you didn't have the comforts of home? Would you follow Jesus if you had to leave behind your family? This is what he's asking you. This is a question. This is what this is all about. This is a cross life. This is what we want. This is what we claim to have. So would you follow Jesus? Because the choice to follow Jesus is not easy. It's not easy because it runs counter or contrary to everything that we think is true and everything that we think is important to us. Would you follow Jesus? If he asked you to give all of that up. The world says you need to think about yourself. And Jesus says that's not true. You don't need to think about yourself. You don't need to think about your family. You don't need to think about anything else. The world tells us, oh, this is what we need to concentrate on. The world says that God surely would never want you to put him above your family. Would he? Now, you're reading the same verses that I'm reading, so you tell me. What's he saying? What does he expect of us? What does he want of us? Jesus says this is exactly what I want you to do. He's flipping everything that we know, everything that we think we know, he's flipping all that upside down. He's changing all of that for us. He's telling all of us, the way you've been thinking about this is not the right way to think about it. I want you to put me first. That's what it means. Now, there is no let me first do this when it comes to following Jesus. There's no I need to take care of this first when following Jesus. Jesus says, follow me. There is nothing except him. That's a cross life. That's why Jesus taught this. That's why he wanted everybody to understand this. But he didn't stop there. So I want you to continue with me now reading. I don't even know what time it is, so you might have to give me a sign or something when it's about time to quit. Verse 28 on through verse 33. Now listen. For which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it? Lest happily after he had laid the foundation is able to finish it, all that behold it began to mock him, saying, This man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king going to make war against another king sitteth not down first and consulteth whether he be able with 10,000 to meet him that comes against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends an ambassador and desires conditions of peace. So likewise, whosoever he be of you that forsaketh not all that he hath. What does it say at the end? Come on. Hey, speak up. Cannot be my disciple. There you go. Cannot be my disciple. There's those words again. So the second thing Jesus wants us to get out of this is that we should be able to understand the cost. Understand the cost. Now I want you to slow down and just think about this illustration that Jesus gives us here. The illustration is to count the cost. Now that tells me right off, there is a cost involved to follow Jesus. It does cost something. Somehow the religious world, in their effort to have crowds, have removed the cost. They've taken that away. We want to make this as easy as we possibly can. Now, I'm old-fashioned about a lot of things, and I have a hard time deciding, what I can tolerate and what I can't tolerate anymore with regard to worship services. But if you can't get up in the morning and put your clothes on, and you want to come in your pajamas, part of me says, I'm glad that you're there, but part of me says, well, you're really not putting out much effort, are you? And we have people in the world, that's what they want to do. Make it as easy as they possibly can. And that's just getting to the building or getting to some place where you can worship. What about really living that cross life? When it comes to understanding the cost, we have to be willing to lose everything that we have in order to follow Him. That's what we have to be willing to do. Now, He doesn't say that that's going to happen, but what He says is we have to be willing to give that up. I have to be willing to count this cost. He means that there is going to be a cost associated with following Him in this life. It's going to cost us something. So don't be deceived. Don't let somebody tell you this is going to be easy, because it's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. Verse 33 really says what Jesus wants us to understand. Whosoever he be of you that forsaketh not all that he hath cannot be my disciple. It is not possible. So any of you who is not willing to renounce all that he has, what can you never be? His disciple. That's good. That's good. There is a cost. And we need to understand the cost. Now there's a third thing here. And this is in verses 34 and 35. As if that weren't enough, he continues to impress upon us this idea. He's teaching some important truths to us. So now he says this. Salt is good. And your Bible may have it like this is a new paragraph. It's not a new paragraph. Actually, it belongs right where it is. Because this is part of what he's been talking about. Salt is good, but if the salt have lost his savor, wherewith shall it be seasoned? It is neither fit for the land, nor yet for the dunghill, but men cast it out. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. Now, what does that have to do with what he's just been talking about? And I think it's this. I think he's talking about being useless. How does that fit in here? He's teaching some important truths. He talks about salt. He says salt that has lost its saltiness is useless. It's worthless. It has no purpose. A disciple that does not renounce all that he has is not, cannot be a disciple. There's no value in that disciple. There's no value in that disciple because that disciple's heart still desires something other than Jesus. That's a connection that I think we should make here and understand this. It's a picture of a cross life. Refusing to renounce all that we have makes us useless to God. I said it. It makes us useless to God. We've lost our salt if we are unwilling to count the cost and if we are unwilling to make the sacrifice that Jesus says we must do in order to be His disciple. Now, we could end right there and say, boy, that was tough. That was really hard. It's a hard thing to say. I've got to choose Him over my family. I've got to choose Him over everything else. I've got to choose Him in I've got to be willing to give everything up in order to follow Him. How do I do that? How can I make that shift? How can I make that change? So Jesus is not wanting us to have miserable lives here on this earth. I think a lot of people would read that and go, man, He just wants me to be miserable. He wants me to not have anything and just follow Him and do all this. No, He's not wanting us to be miserable while we're here on this earth. Does Jesus want a bunch of people who would rather be seeking their own things but begrudgingly follow Him because they have to? And a lot of people who are Christians today look at it that way and they say, I have to do this. I have to attend services. I have to go and help somebody who's in need. I have to do all of these things. It's like we're being forced. Like somebody's got a gun to our heads and they're forcing us to do something. Is that what Jesus wants? No, that's not what He wants at all. The point is that He's making here is that goal is not to live in this world having the life that we've been called to walk because we have to make so many sacrifices. That's not the goal at all. I want to go back to this idea at the first where He talked about hatred. We noted that it's not an emotion, it's not a malicious intent that there's no motive behind that. That's bad in that sense. The point is to show us that the choice, you can't estimate the cost. You can't estimate the value. You can't estimate the worth of the choice in following Jesus. Discipleship is for those who have considered the worth of Jesus and are ready and willing to sacrifice everything that they have for Him. Above all else, they want Him. I think following Jesus has been portrayed under a false narrative for a long time. And we've been guilty of that. We've been responsible for part of that. Following Jesus is a sacrifice. But we should view it as a sacrifice in this sense. Now, see if this resonates with you. See if this makes any sense to you. We should follow Jesus as a sacrifice as much as we would view going on vacation as a sacrifice. What are you talking about? I'm talking about this. When you get ready to go on vacation, what do? Well, you got to spend a lot of time packing clothes. You got to make all the arrangements. You got to, have everything lined up. You got to spend a lot of money. You got to do all that. But when you get there, when you get to your destination, is it worth it? Well, sure, it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. And I think that's how we should look at following Jesus. We should understand it that way. It's that kind of sacrifice. I'm willing to make the sacrifice that's necessary in order to go on vacation somewhere. I'm willing to make the sacrifice necessary in order to follow Jesus. That's how I should view this. That's how I should look at this thing. That Jesus wants us to do everything because we view that as better than anything else. I have to give up all my personal projects. I have to give up all my personal plans. I have to give up all my goals so that I can follow the projects, the plans, and the goals that He has in mind for me. Now, He'll throw you a curve every now and then. He threw us a curve several years ago, and our curve was going to Russia. Now, most of you knew me. You knew that I was a mama's boy. You knew that I was a home boy. I didn't want to go anywhere, and I never had been anywhere much, and didn't really care to go anywhere. But He threw us a curve, and the curve came into our lives, my wife and I, came into our lives to say, here's an open door for you, and I want you to go here. Now, what that involved? And I'm not saying this, to pat myself on the back and all that and everything. Give up a job, just walk away from a job. Give up a house, give up friends, give up family. Give up all that to go a few thousand miles away and try to learn a language that you didn't know, and try to teach people that didn't understand the concept of God, and try to introduce people to a Bible that none of them had. Most of us have got 5, 6, 8, 10 copies laying around the house somewhere, never open them up, move them around every now and then. They didn't have even one. Now, that's the curve. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying to pat Joe Paul on the back or anything else. I'm just saying that simply this, is that there are times when God will put something in front of you and He'll say, this is what I want you to do. Now, what do I say? Well, I got a pretty good job. And I got a pretty good life here. And what you find out when you go and do something like that, you come back, guess what? You don't have that anymore. Don't have that job, don't have that life, don't have that connection anymore, all of that. Was that a sacrifice? As much as going on vacation. Was it worth it? Absolutely. Would I do it again? In a heartbeat. Do I have any regrets about it? Not one. Because that's the choice that He wanted me to make. And we made it. He does that for all of us. Now, it may not be something as drastic as that for everybody, but He does that for every one of us. He wants us to understand that I abandon everything that I have in my mind, my plan, for His. Because this is what He wants from me. So, how am I doing on time? Somebody tell me. Because I honestly don't know what time it is.
They'll ring the bell.
They'll ring a bell? I'm going to quit before the bell. Joanne, you get your wish.
You got 10 minutes.
How many?
10.
10. And I'll use... I'd like to yield my time to the sermon. Can I do that? Yeah, because the sermon may take a little longer than this. Okay. So here's how we're going to wind this up. We need to count the cost of following Christ. I'm pretty sure I've said that 100 times already. We need to count the cost and see if the math makes any sense to us. See if we can understand it this way. If we choose this life and not Jesus, then we will gain everything that this life has to offer. That's pretty simple. Everything that this life has to offer. Now, the only difficulty with that is this. Everything in this life is temporary. Everything. I don't care what it is. You build the nicest, biggest house that you want to build, spend $1 million on it, doesn't matter. That's temporary. You're not going to take that with you. Drive the biggest, nicest, fanciest car. We started on this trip. Every light possible that could come on a vehicle is now on my car. And I have no idea why. Runs fine, drives fine, but every light and every bell and every whistle is going off. So I just told Lynn, so We'll just drive it till it drops. That's all I know to do. You can have the biggest, nicest, fanciest car that you want to have. Guess what? It's temporary. Have the biggest bank account that you want to have. Guess what? It's temporary. So this is a choice. This is the math. We put it in. So let's see if this makes sense. I'm going to add this up and decide if this is the way I want to go. If I choose this life, I can have everything that this life offers, but I have to know this about this life. It's just temporary. Things here don't last, do they? They rust, they break, they disappear. Somebody steal them, they die sometimes, they're meaningless, they don't have any real value. It does not last. We're exchanging eternal joy and eternal riches for things that are just vapor and mist. They just disappear. They're gone that quickly. We're giving up the eternal presence of Jesus for whatever you're doing right now. Whatever's important to you right now. It's like giving up a paid vacation to go to work. None of us in our right minds would ever do that. None of us would ever say, somebody says, I'm going to send you on a paid vacation somewhere. Everything's covered. All you got to do is just go. Now, I'd rather work. Now, how many of us would say that? None of us. I mean, honestly, none of us would ever say that. Why would anybody do that? But that's what we do with God. God's offering us true rest. He's offering us true joy. He's offering us eternity. And what are we saying to Him? Now, I'd rather go to work. I'd rather just keep what I've got. Cross life is a life of sacrifice. It's a life of deep sacrifice. It means giving up everything for Jesus. But we do so willingly. Do you have something that you want to forfeit? Something that you would give up for Him? Because you find out it's worth it. You find out it absolutely is worth it. We want to abandon anything and everything in this life for everything that is in the life to come. We say, take it all. Because above all things, I want to be with Jesus. And I want to be in His presence forever. Cross life. Maybe we'll put some bumper stickers out and say cross life. That'd be pretty good. Anybody want to throw anything in here? I made it to the bell, didn't I? I don't know what the bell means, but they did ring one.